Do we need more women in the boardroom, the same way we need more white sprinters in the 100 metres? We're told incessantly in the media, by government, by think tanks, by experts, by supremacist women's groups, that we need more women in boardrooms. We need more women in computing, more women in engineering, more women in politics, more women in leadership roles, more women CEOs, and even, apparently, and with no small amount of irony, we need more women in the kitchen. The logic to all this goes as follows. Women are half the population. Business leaders, computer scientists, engineers, top chefs, etc. are less than 50% women. Therefore, women are being discriminated against, and something must be done to redress the imbalance. And that really is the extent of the logic being employed by women's groups such as the Fawcett Society. Women's choices are ignored. Men's merit is ignored. The numbers add up to oppression as far as they're concerned. So let's apply this feminine logic to another area where men predominate, the prison population. Women are half the population. Prisoners are less than 50% women. Therefore, women are not being fairly represented, they're being discriminated against, and something must be done to redress the imbalance. Can you see the problem that the Fawcett Society ignores? There are not more men in prison than women, simply because they're men. There are more men in prison than women, because men commit more of the crimes that are punishable by prison sentences than women. In other words, criminal men make themselves more eligible for prison than women, in the same way that talented and hard-working men make themselves more eligible for the boardroom than women. It's because of the choices they make and the things that they do. Be it good, be it bad, or be it ugly, men choose it more than women, and so men get it more than women. It's not rocket science. Why do men commit a higher proportion of more serious crimes than women? It's because of men's nature and men's nurture. Why do men succeed more as entrepreneurs and business leaders, politicians, engineers and computer scientists? It's because of men's nature and men's nurture.
For a great many years, women with the experience, ability and preparedness to work hard have made it to the board. I mean, they've already been favoured over men. The idea that they're being kept down by men is quite absurd.
Now what if women's groups, such as the Fawcett Society, were to campaign for a quota for women in prison, the same way they insist on a quota for women in boardrooms? After all, if the women aren't there in prison, in the same numbers as men, well, there must be discrimination, right? And it would make sense for the Fawcett Society to support such a campaign. It's no more intellectually backward than any of their other campaigns where they want to have more representation for women everywhere. But they actually campaign for the opposite, for alternative punishments for women than prison. Prison is apparently wrong for women, and they shouldn't be there. But of course the boardroom is right. Female supremacy doesn't get any clearer than this, and we need to understand that this is what women's groups are about.
So you're saying the glass ceiling expression, do you think that that's falling out of favour and to be replaced with a pipeline?
It is, and I think the reason the glass ceiling has fallen out of favour is that feminists increasingly realised that if they were to make progress with getting more women into the boardroom, they had to make themselves more acceptable to the existing men on those boards. Now, the problem they faced was that those men on the boards knew damn well that there was no glass ceiling. So they had to come up with a new argument, and the argument they've concocted, invented as they always do, is that there are a whole host of issues that keep women from the boardroom. So they'll talk, for example, about women's need for role models. And you have to ask yourself, if these are dynamic leaders, these women, why do they need role models? And where will the role models come from exactly? It is just crazy.
If it makes sense for women's groups to demand that there should be more female engineers or more women in computing, or 40% of company boards should be women, simply because they decide it should be so. If it makes sense to ignore the hard work, the time served and the merit which puts men predominantly in those positions. If this is sensible, maybe we should make arbitrary demands elsewhere. Maybe we should demand 40% representation for white men in the Olympic 100-metre final, simply because some group decides it should be so. There have been no white men in the Olympic 100-metre final for the last 30 years. Every Olympic sees 8 black men lining up to race for gold. And not just any black men, but typically black men of Caribbean origin. So how can that be right? How can the premier athletic event in the world have no white men in it? Or Chinese men? Or Indian men? The two most populous nations on earth, with no sprinters in the Olympic final? There must be discrimination going on. It's the only possible explanation. Blacks are being preferred for success in 100 metres, simply because they're black. The all-black starting lineup is clearly a problem to be fixed. So we've decided that there need to be more white men in the 100-metre final. How do we go about it? Well, for a start, we could say that there's obviously a glass ceiling for white sprinters. Black sprinters are making white sprinters slow, somehow, in some way. Maybe that voodoo blacks are into or something. Sprinting is an all-black club, and it's freezing white sprinters out. We need to spend more money, we need to advertise, we need to legislate, and help white sprinters to realise that speed is all in the mind. And if they could just fight through the prejudice, they too could be Usain Bolt. We could say that simply having some whites in the final would make the event better somehow. Better groomed, more colourful, it would smell better, definitely be less aggressive. Whites would bring a special kind of running to the event. A smarter, more efficient style of running. Unique to whites, that would be more popular with spectators. Rather than all these blacks who all look alike and run alike and eat too much fried chicken. If it's too much testosterone in the boardroom, maybe it's too much melanin in the 100 metres. If the future of computing is too important to be left to men, then surely the future of the 100 metres is too important to be left to blacks. We can believe all that, right? That the only reason that white sprinters aren't in the Olympic final is because blacks want to keep them out of it. It's not that these certain few black athletes run the 100 metres in the fastest time, and so they deserve to make it into the final. No, it's because white sprinters are oppressed. That makes sense, right? The 100 metres is not an event about colour. It's an event about speed. It's not an event for black men. It's an event for fast men. And if those few particularly fast men are typically Caribbean black, so be it. Any white athlete considering a career in 100 metres looks at the times he needs to run in order to compete. He doesn't look at the colour or race or country of his fellow competitors. That's not relevant to his decision. He looks at the qualifying times that are run, and he compares those times to his own. If he can run fast enough, he can compete. If he can't, he chooses another event. And funnily enough, that's the same process that any black sprinter goes through. If some group insisted that at least 3 of the finalists had to be white, how would we make that happen? Well, it's not rocket science. We'd have to take 3 faster athletes off and put 3 slower ones in their place. So the only way to make an arbitrary quota like that work would be to hurt the 100 metres, to hurt 3 worthy athletes, and to make a mockery of 3 white men who know they have no business being in that final. Everybody loses, yet this sort of action is what women say they want for our boardrooms. Apparently Britain needs more engineers, and those engineers should be female. If Britain needs more engineers, and those people coming forward are mostly men, then we should be grateful for that, and we should cultivate that. Not blame those men for their ability, or criticise them for a problem that doesn't exist. If we want more engineers, we need to encourage those with engineering aptitude. If those happen to be boys mainly, and they are boys mainly, then so be it. White men and Caribbean black men are different. Men and women are different. Women don't generally choose careers in engineering, the same way that white athletes don't generally choose to run the 100 metres. It's because they can't do it as well as the competition. It's not discrimination on any basis other than ability. Many people, too many people, like to believe that the differences between men and women stop as if by magic at the brainstem, as if our bodies are entirely different, but our brains are entirely the same. They're certainly not the same, as copious amounts of data make plain.
Certainly, first of all, the way that the right-left hemispheres connect up with men and women is strikingly different. The principal difference, though, and this is an astonishing finding, there are orders of magnitude differences between IQ-related grey and white matter. The white matter is that's basically from the myelin sheaths on nerves. These are long nerve connections. So it's a connective tissue between different nerve centres. We know that there's something like a 10-fold difference in favour of females in that sort of brain tissue in brains. Conversely, in terms of the grey matter, which are actually the nerve cells themselves, so it's tissue mainly composed of nerve bodies, we know there's roughly an order of magnitude 10-fold difference in favour of males. So that would suggest very strongly that the converging evidence we've got that suggests that women tend to use different parts of the brain and sort of coordinate strongly, whereas men tend to be very good at focus and process the actual processing. They've got very similar cognitive abilities overall, but their style of cognition, the way that they process and coordinate within their brain to approach solving a particular problem seems to be in many cases very, very different.
So men have different brains to women. We have different outlook, different mentality, different aspirations. And in terms of our place in the world, we have a fire under our arses that most women fail to appreciate.
See, we women don't have to make ourselves up. Because of our biology, we create life, we bring life into this earth. And if we do nothing else with our lives, That is the most valuable thing we can do as far as I'm concerned. Men, from very young, have to make themselves up. They have to make themselves into something. They can't just do nothing. It just doesn't happen for them. So I think in a way, biologically, women are very much more advantaged than men. And I don't think anybody ever thinks like that. And so when you say to a little boy, what are you going to be? He's got to be, an airline pilot or an astronaut or in the Navy or boxer or something. You ask a little girl, an awful lot of little girls will very happily say, I'm going to have children and be married. Even now, little girls will say that. Even now, I mean, for all the brainwashing that's gone on, what are little girls playing with? Barbie dolls and kitchens and, my children, my grandchildren, they do that.
Would we produce more sprinters of world-class ability if we had a quota for white sprinters? And would we genuinely expect that, however long it took, at the end of the process of favouring white sprinters, do you really think that we would have even numbers of black and white sprinters all running at around about the same speed? The fastest sprinters rise to the top by themselves, not by quota. And so do the best people to run our companies, and the best people to be engineers, and the best people to do X, Y, and Z. Let's listen to what female supremacy sounds like. We must have more whites in 100 metres. Why? The 100 metres will be run better with a fairer balance of whites and blacks, avoiding ghetto culture and low intellect. Are you saying that there's a problem with the 100 metres as it is today? Yes, there are too many blacks in it. Oh no, you didn't. What's the problem with that? They proved themselves the fastest against the clock. That's not it at all. They're only there because of the all-black club. It's not easy being a white athlete amongst all those blacks. Moreover, there's a growing body of evidence, largely drawn from spectators, that having more white sprinters makes a positive difference to the quality of sprinting. Really? Like what? You know what I mean, you know how blacks are. They're too impulsive, too many false starts. Plus you have drug taking and criminality. That would reduce if you had more white sprinters. So is the 100 metres as it is unfair to white athletes? Of course it is. Why else are there no white sprinters in the 100 metre final? Well, because they don't run fast enough against the clock. That's bullshit. White sprinters are capable of running every bit as fast as black sprinters. Then why don't they? Well, there's a pipeline problem. We're not getting to these white athletes early enough and encouraging them to run faster. They've been subject to systematic discrimination, so they don't believe in themselves, and this holds back their speed. We need special programs and funding to target white children early. Then we'd have more white men in the sport, and we could finally clear the starting lineup of all these blacks. It's better for everybody, and it will enhance white power. But any white athlete can do well in 100 metres if you can run fast enough. Yes, but whites see all those blacks and are discouraged from even trying. And there's racism. What's the solution to these problems that are holding white sprinters back? For a start, speed is overrated. It doesn't matter how fast white sprinters run relative to black sprinters. We need more whites in the final, and that's it. We need whites in the final to achieve diversity and fairness, regardless of their sprint speeds. We must redress the current racial imbalance that exists. But why should there be a racial balance in the 100 metres? Whoever runs fastest makes it into the final. Isn't that equal opportunity? If there are no white men in the final, it's discrimination pure and simple. We don't want to see yet another Olympic final with an all-black lineup. This travesty has to end, and we need more white men in there to improve the event. We've now moved to a place where it's unacceptable to have the presence of whites absent from the 100 metres. Evidence shows a direct link between a faster event and more white involvement. What evidence? Damn, is that the time? Gotta rush. With all this focus on women, we need to wake up and smell the coffee. Feminism is about giving an unfair advantage to women in order to counter non-existent discrimination. That means it's favouritism, forever, and that therefore means it's about supremacy. What we're dealing with the idea of quotas for women on boards, or in computing or engineering, or any other area where women are not as numerous as men, is not an attempt for some sort of equality, it's an attempt for supremacism. It's the idea that women bring something special to these jobs, and that even though women are clearly choosing not to do these jobs in the same numbers as men, we still need to force a number of women into these jobs because they will redress the failures of men, they will empower women, and it will enable a better tomorrow. That's not about equality, that's not about being fair, that's about telling us that women are better than men. Having women in your company will improve your bottom line because they're women. Women should lean in and lead men. You'll make more money in your business simply by having a woman on your board. The reality is that there's as much evidence that having more women on boards leads to better business performance as there is that having more white sprinters in 100 metres would lead to faster running times.
Feminists always claim, or have claimed for a great many years, that there's a positive relationship between increased women's representation on boards and corporate performance. And well, I've spent a lot of time in the last 3 years challenging various supporters of more women in the boardroom to provide this evidence. And whenever they point me to studies, those studies always show the same thing. They always show that there might be a correlation between more women on board and corporate performance, but they don't show causation. It would be a little bit like pointing out that very rich men tend to marry very beautiful young women. And it would be like claiming that those young women make those men rich. I mean, that's basically the line of argument they have, and it's utterly absurd. I think it's probably true that the best female executives are drawn to the most profitable companies because those companies can afford the best packages. But it's simply a modern echo of the traditional attraction that women feel for rich men and for wealth. There have in the last year or two been 2 independent studies published which show a relationship between increasing women on boards and corporate performance. One was a study conducted by Ken Ahern and Amy Dietmar of the University of Michigan, and the other one was one prepared for a paper prepared for the Deutsche Bundesbank. And both studies showed a negative relationship between increasing women on boards and corporate performance. There is no evidence whatever that increasing women on boards will improve corporate performance.
Many people struggle with the idea that feminism is a cover for female supremacy. It's a bit like the velvet glove over a steel fist. People look at the dictionary definition of feminism and see the lovely word equality, but they don't see the heavy boot of female empowerment, at least not until they've been squashed by it. The dictionary definition of feminism is a work of fiction. Feminism is legitimately about equality for women in the same way that Tony Soprano is legitimately a waste management consultant. And just like other forms of organised crime, feminism is parasitic in nature, and it makes demands of men and the rest of society. We are required to do things for women rather than women doing things for themselves. For example, demanding a quota for women on boards when more suitably qualified men are more available than women. The demands are made anyway, and with the looming force of law behind it. Think of it like a criminal shakedown. The mafia goes into a business, which they've had no part in building, and demand money or else. Female supremacist groups go into successful businesses, which they've had no part in building, and demand seats on the board for women, or else. Twitter is a case in point. It's a company that was conceived by men and built by men. The development work, all of the hard work to get it functioning was done by men. And then when the business is running and it's good and solid and profitable, then suddenly the demand goes out to have women on the board. Why? With the law and the media and government and every public mouthpiece on the bandwagon, the mafia could learn a thing or two from women supremacist groups. The Fawcett Society, which incidentally has the same initials as female supremacy, says that having more women on boards helps to avoid groupthink. But the acute irony is that the hindrance of bigoted groupthink is something that's only demonstrated by themselves.
Almost everything that feminists say, after you spend time analysing what they have to say, you soon realise that feminist theory, to use that expression, is nothing more than an expression of feminist fantasies, lies, delusions and myths.
Appearances can be deceptive, especially if you have imagined grievances, as women's groups demonstrably do. How things look and how things are 2 very different things. A certain few men no more achieve chief executive status and all the other positions on the board because they're men, any more than a certain few black sprinters achieve Olympic gold and all the other places in the final simply for being black. When we look at the Olympic finalists and ask ourselves the question, what do they all have in common? The answer might come back promptly, well, they're all black. When the answer should come back, well, they're all fast. These men were not selected for their national teams because they're black. These men didn't qualify for the final because they're black. Any white sprinter can join these black sprinters if they have what it takes. In the final analysis, the Olympic 100-metre final is not an all-black event. It's an all-fast event. Women and men take note. A recurring theme with men is that men are in lockstep with what women think, or with what any group claiming to speak for women say that women think, no matter how unsupportable, unmerited it is. We want more women in all these things because women say that they want women in all these things. even if those women aren't there, even if they choose not to be there, even if they're not interested in being there, even if they're not qualified to be there. Picking diversity over talent has to be a losing proposition.
Given that kind of equality of opportunity, it doesn't follow that you're going to get a completely identical equality of outcome. If it's the case that men are more competitive, they're more willing to sacrifice various other aspects of their life in order to get more money and status, and they're willing to take more risks, for example, take on more hazardous jobs and get paid more as a result. If that's the case, even if you have perfect equality of opportunity, you still wouldn't expect identity either in the kinds of jobs that men and women choose to do, or given that different jobs get paid different amounts, you wouldn't expect equality, complete identity in income either in terms of how much, how unpleasant the job is such that you get rewarded more, and how much energy you have to put into climbing the greasy pole. You can't use inequality of outcome as evidence that there's something wrong necessarily with the system.
Do we need a quota for white men in the Olympic 100-metre final because white men aren't there? No. Is there something wrong with the 100 metres because white men are not making it into the final? No. Will forcing white men into the final, by hook or by crook, improve the event? Will 100-metre times reduce? No. We don't need more women in computing or engineering or in the boardroom, any more than we need more white sprinters. Those women that can do it, good luck to them. Those white sprinters that can do it, good luck to them. But women's groups aren't suggesting that more women on boards means that more women will get to do the jobs that are more commonly done by men. What they're suggesting is that more women on boards will improve these jobs, simply because they're women. It's equivalent to thinking that more white men in 100 metres will improve world record times, simply because they're white. To think that more women will somehow improve these functions, simply for being women, is, to put it charitably, wishful, but it's more accurately described for what it is: supremacist. It's nonsense in its purest form, yet it seems irresistible to our national governments and to the European Union and to the United Nations, etc. And why is this nonsense so powerful? Well, that's easy. It's because there's nothing that men won't do to redress a grievance that women claim exists. Any grievance, real or imagined, from banknotes to boardrooms, forever.